What is the difference between Adderall and Adderall XR? So there are different types of Adderall out there. There's Adderall and then there's Adderall XR. There's a difference between the two. I take Adderall. I don't take Adderall XR. And here was my experience with both of them and why I ended up going with Adderall over Adderall XR. Both are ADHD meds. Both are amazing. Both are still Adderall, so it's the same still chemical ingredients, but they affect your system a little bit differently. I ended up just going with normal Adderall, and I tried XR. It had some effects to me that weren't what I was looking for. It actually made it a little difficult to manage my ADHD, and that's part of trial and error when it comes to meds, is finding out what works for you. So here's my experience. If you're new to the channel, hit the like and subscribe button. What's up, guys? My name is Eric, and I'm diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, GAD, and MDD. Those are my diagnoses: level 1 autism. I lost a wife and a father to suicide. I'm a recovering cocaine and alcoholic addict. I like to share everything that I've been through just to help somebody feel a little bit less alone. One of the things I've had a lot of people always reach out to me on is ADHD meds. I'm very, very open about ADHD. I love being ADHD. It's one of the diagnoses that I would never trade if I could. Now, this is Adderall. These right here are actually 20 milligram Adderall pills. And there's a big difference between Adderall XR and Adderall. One of the biggest differences is how they look. So Adderall XR comes in a capsule form, and you see the little pellets inside. I've done videos about snorting Adderall. You're not going to snort Adderall XR, but now Adderall itself comes in a pill form. And yes, I've snorted these before. Did I ever abuse them in that sense? To a point, but this is my ADHD med. This is actually what gets me through the day. When I ended up getting sober off of coke and off of alcohol and decided I didn't have to put stuff up my nose, made it a lot easier to manage. So Adderall itself, and why I went with Adderall, is it enters my system differently than what XR did. When I take Adderall, I take 10 milligrams in the morning. I take it right around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. Right by about 8:30, 8:45, it's into my system. I can feel it working, and I'm off to the day. When I took Adderall XR, it actually took a lot longer for it to hit my system. I feel that after I take Adderall, I can feel this in my system roughly, I would say, about 15, 20 minutes max. I start feeling it in my system. With Adderall XR, I almost felt like I didn't feel it in my system for almost an hour. And that's how meds affect us differently. Now, Adderall and Adderall XR are the same, but one is an extended release. With that extended release, it hit my system a lot later. I knew how to manage Adderall. Adderall, I take 10 milligrams in the morning. I take 10 milligrams in the afternoon. I take 20 milligrams of Adderall. That's all I end up taking. With Adderall XR, I could not get the time frames down and also how my days worked. When you're taking medication, it's supposed to make your days easier, not harder. Adderall XR actually made them harder because when Adderall XR started to exit out of my system, it was too late in the day. When I take it at right around noon for my 10 milligram dose right at noon, it gets out of my system. I can feel it leaving my system right around 5, 6 o'clock. I can feel it leaving my system. You can feel the dopamine drop. You can feel the mood change. There's a difference. You can feel it when Adderall is leaving your system. With Adderall XR, it didn't leave my system until 8, 9 o'clock at night. And that to me was a problem. One of the side effects of Adderall is challenge sleeping. Well, it's never been a challenge for me to sleep with Adderall because it calmed me down where I felt in control of everything and I wasn't overwhelmed with thoughts that I could sleep. But the one thing it did is it does throw off my appetite. So I ended up missing more meals and I stayed focused longer and I wasn't able to quite unwind like I need to finish off my day. I found myself staying up later. I found myself doing more projects. I found myself being more productive. But I wasn't being productive in the sense that I needed to. My job starts at 8:30 in the morning. When I'm not on my game at 8:30 in the morning and this med's not kicking in until about 9:30, my day has already started and it threw off my whole day. My anxiety level went up a little bit. I always felt like I was a little bit behind when I got onto the Adderall. It was hard for me to almost get that initial focus down of what do I work on because of that extended release on it. And that is why I went back to the meds. It was nothing of how the med itself affected me. It was when it hit me. When the med actually got into my system and did what it was supposed to do, it was supposed to calm these thoughts, supposed to calm the squirrels, get me focused and make me feel productive and get me just going where I felt like a normal human being, my day had already began. And now I feel like I'm playing catch up. Now I'm stressed out. And it made me feel to the point where it was a med that almost wasn't working. I got very frustrated very easily because I'm going, this isn't how my day is supposed to go. So it brought on a lot of unneeded stress. Taking the second dose of it, it's now carrying me through too late that I noticed when I was getting home later from work. I wasn't getting home on time. When I got home from work, I was starting other projects. I wasn't spending time with my family like I should have. I wasn't like unwinding where we have that wind down time. And it's like, okay, time for bed. I like to try and be in bed right around 10:30. And at 10:30, I was doing projects. I'm getting into bed at midnight now. And now all of a sudden, I'm not working out like I was. There was so much of my day in my routine because I'm very routine oriented that it threw so much of it off that I became very frustrated, became very angry. Just, it wasn't working for me. And that's the thing that people don't realize. With that alone, it was hard to explain almost to my psychiatrist that, hey, this helps, but I'm not being productive in the sense that I was, and I feel that it's not helping me and it's hurting me. But I like how the Adderall helps me because unlike Ritalin, it doesn't drop me as quick. So trying to explain that to a doctor, you have to find the right doctor that understands how trial and error is. Even though a medication's the same medication, how it's released into your system and how it's released differently into your system is different for everybody. And that's why it's so important to do trial and error. That's why it's so important to communicate with your doctor of how you feel, how the meds are affecting you. Because not all meds are bad, and we get this whole thing in our head that we're not normal and that we need meds. And then if the med doesn't work, we toss it aside, we don't tell anybody, we lie to our doctor, we pretend that everything's okay, and it's not. Don't be afraid to tell your doctor. I mean, this was a weird conversation to have with my psychiatrist of like, hey, I want to go back to Adderall, I don't want to do the XR version. But when you do that, you have to be able to explain how it made you feel, what you felt, why you want to go back, so that they understand how that medicine was affecting you, the pros and cons to it, and then even then, maybe try a different med or a different trial and error to see if something else will work. And we sometimes lose track of that. You know, we look at our doctors sometimes as they're not listening to us, but sometimes we're not giving them the right information to be able to listen to. And again, communication with your therapist is everything. So remember that when you are working with your doctor and when you're taking meds. Even though a med might be the same med, it will affect you differently. We're all different. So remember that. When you hear somebody sharing about a med that really works for them and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that the med's any bad. It just means that your body is different than theirs and it affects you different than the med affected them. And again, I'm a huge fan of trial and error. I know it's easier said than done because let's face it, like trial and error with SSRIs for me was difficult. I mean, they made me suicidal. So you have to be careful with those medications. And again, that's where it comes back to communication with your therapist. Adderall itself in the pill form is the best for me. It's not capsules at all. They're pills. I break them in half. This is how I do a 10 milligram off a 20 milligram pill, 10 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, and that's what worked for me. And it took me a long time to realize it. It took me a long time to realize that this was the combination that worked. I went up in the dosage, I went down in the dosage. 10 and 10 is perfect. And if your body does start to change and you start to feel that the meds don't work the same anymore, let your doctor know. Because you know what? It might be time to change it up. There have been points where I've thought to myself, maybe I want to try Vyvanse. Maybe I want to try something else because maybe I'm not getting the most out of Adderall. But the side effects of it are always going to be that dry mouth. That's what I've experienced, the loss of appetite. Those were the big ones that I noticed. And it was like, you know what? Those are okay. I do pee a lot because I end up drinking a lot of water because I have dry mouth. But those side effects I'm fine with, I can work around with. And what it does for me in my life is so much easier than not having meds at all, or even starting over and trying to go through all the different meds again. So just remember that. I mean, don't feel alone. That's my experience. Both meds work the same for me. Just the time difference with them is what actually led me back to going to the regular Adderall, not the Adderall XR. That was the biggest thing. Other of how it calmed me down, how my thought process worked, how I felt, the side effects were the same. Everything was the same. But when it got out of my system was different. And that's what made it more challenging for me. And that's what made me lean back to the regular Adderall. I'd love to hear your comments. Comment down below. Hit that like and subscribe button. It's just about sharing experiences so that none of us go alone in life. And especially when it comes to medication, we do research on meds because we're scared. Let's face it, we're scared. We feel alone. We feel that no one's going to understand. This is my experience. Not super exciting, but there was a big enough difference that I went back to the pill form and not the capsule form. So hopefully this helps somebody. Comment down below, hit that like and subscribe button. I'd love to have you along for the journey. Just remember this, no matter what you're going through, you got this, that you matter. So don't give up.